yourself for lies.
The doorbell rang at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, cutting through the quiet hum of our evening routine. Sarah looked up from her laptop, eyebrows raised in that particular way that meant she wasn't expecting anyone either. Through the peephole, I saw her mother, Linda, her brother Mike, and his wife Jessica clustered on our front porch like a delegation. Odd, I thought. They usually call first. "It's your family," I said, stepping back from the door. Sarah's face brightened, but there was something forced about it, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, wonderful. I wonder what brings them by." When I opened the door, the energy felt immediately wrong. Linda's hug was too tight, too long. Mike's handshake was firmer than usual, his eye contact more intense. Jessica bounced on her toes with an excitement that seemed manufactured, like she was performing enthusiasm rather than feeling it. "We were just in the neighborhood," Linda said, though they lived 40 minutes away. "Thought we'd drop by and catch up." In the neighborhood. The phrase hung in the air like a lie we were all pretending to believe. They settled into our living room with an odd formality. Mike perched on the edge of the couch rather than sinking into it. Jessica kept checking her phone, then putting it away, then checking it again. Linda's eyes swept the room as if cataloging our possessions, the new television, the artwork Sarah had bought last month, the stack of bills I'd left on the side table. "Coffee?" Sarah offered, already moving toward the kitchen. "Actually," Linda said, her voice taking on a different quality, smoother, more deliberate, "we wanted to talk to you both about something exciting." There it is, I thought, the real reason for the visit. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken purpose. I found myself studying their faces, searching for clues about what was coming. Mike's jaw was set in determination. Jessica's smile seemed painted on. Linda's eyes held a gleam that made my stomach tighten with unease. Sarah returned with mugs, and I watched her settle beside me on the couch. But even as she sat close enough that our knees touched, something felt distant about her presence. She leaned forward slightly toward her family, creating an almost imperceptible shift in allegiance that I felt in my bones. "So," began Mike, pulling out his phone, "we've stumbled onto something incredible, something that's going to change everything for our family." The word family echoed strangely. I noticed he was looking at Sarah when he said it, not at me. Mike's phone screen glowed as he held it up, displaying what looked like a professional website with sleek graphics and bold numbers. "Look at this," he said, his voice carrying the fervor of a true believer. "Quantum asset management. They're revolutionizing cryptocurrency investment through AI-driven market analysis." The words sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced this presentation. Jessica nodded enthusiastically beside him, pulling out her own phone to show additional screenshots. "Look at these returns," she gushed, scrolling through what appeared to be account balances. "Mike's cousin Dave started with just $5,000 3 months ago. He's already at $37,000. Dave, I thought. The same Dave who lost his shirt on that energy drink MLM 2 years ago? Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The beautiful thing is, it's not just about individual returns. When you bring in new investors, family, friends, you get accelerated growth bonuses. It's about building wealth together as a community." There it is again. Community, family, the language of belonging, of inclusion and exclusion. Sarah took Mike's phone, studying the screen with growing excitement. "These numbers are incredible. How does it work exactly?" "Proprietary algorithms," Mike explained, waving his hand dismissively. "The technical details aren't important. What matters is the track record. Look." He swiped to another screen showing testimonials. Smiling faces, brief quotes about financial freedom and early retirement. I found myself leaning back, creating distance. "What's the minimum investment?" "That's the beauty of it," Jessica said. "You can start with as little as $10,000, but the real growth happens when you commit to the premium tiers. 50,000 gets you into the platinum level, which is where the serious money is made. 50,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was nearly half our savings. And there's urgency here, Linda added, her tone shifting to something more pressing. They're closing enrollment for new premium members at the end of this month. After that, you'd have to wait until next quarter, and by then, she shrugged, letting the implication hang. Classic scam tactics, I thought. Urgency, exclusivity, fear of missing out. Can I see some documentation? Regulatory filings? Company information? Audited returns? The room's energy shifted subtly. Mike's smile tightened. Jessica's enthusiasm dimmed a degree. Linda's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. It's all proprietary, Mike said. They can't release detailed information publicly because it would compromise their competitive advantage. But look at the results. You can't argue with success. I looked at Sarah, expecting her to share my skepticism. Instead, I saw her studying the phone screen with the same intensity her family was showing. When she looked up at me, her expression held a question that felt like a challenge. "What do you think, honey?" she asked, but the way she said it suggested she'd already formed her own opinion. Over the following days, I watched Sarah transform in ways both subtle and profound. She began staying up later, scrolling through investment forums and cryptocurrency news sites. Her laptop screen was always angled away from me, creating a barrier of privacy that had never existed before. The conversations started small, casual mentions of success stories Mike had shared, articles about people retiring early through smart investments. But I could see the hunger growing in her eyes, a gleam that reminded me uncomfortably of her mother's expression during that first visit. "You know," she said one evening as we prepared dinner, "maybe we're being too conservative with our money. It's just sitting in savings, earning nothing." "It's earning security," I replied, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. "It's our emergency fund, our down payment fund." "But what if it could be more? What if it could be our freedom fund?" Freedom fund. The language was shifting, becoming more aspirational, more emotional. I recognized the vocabulary from Mike's presentation. That weekend, her family visited again. This time, they brought Dave, the cousin who'd supposedly turned 5,000 into 37,000. He was a thin man with nervous energy and eyes that didn't quite meet mine when we shook hands. "It's been incredible," he told us, pulling up his account on his phone. "I mean, I was skeptical at first too. We all were. But look at these numbers." The numbers were impressive, I had to admit. But something about the interface looked off. Too polished, too perfect. The gains were too consistent, following curves that seemed more mathematical than market-driven. "The key is trusting the system," Dave continued. "I almost pulled out after the first month when I didn't see immediate results. Thank God Mike convinced me to stay in. Now look where I am." I watched Sarah's face as Dave spoke. She was drinking in every word, her expression shifting from interest to excitement to something approaching hunger. When she looked at me, I saw a question there, not whether this was legitimate, but whether I was going to be the obstacle standing between her and this opportunity. "What do you think?" Mike asked me directly, his tone casual but his eyes intense. "Ready to join the family business?" Family business, as if I wasn't already family, as if my inclusion was conditional on my participation. "I'd like to do some research first, look into the company, understand the technology, see some verified returns." The silence that followed felt loaded. Linda's smile became strained. Jessica's enthusiasm dimmed. Mike's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Research is good," Linda said carefully, "but sometimes analysis paralysis can cost you opportunities. The market doesn't wait for perfect information." Sarah reached over and took my hand, but her touch felt different, more like a negotiation than affection. "We could start small," she suggested, "just to test the waters." "We," but I could see in her eyes that she'd already decided. She was asking for my permission, not my partnership. I spent the next week diving deep into research. What I found made my stomach turn. Quantum Asset Management had no regulatory filings with the SEC. Their website was registered just 6 months ago. The testimonials used stock photos I could trace to multiple other investment scams. The proprietary algorithm was described in language so vague it was essentially meaningless. Most damning of all, the returns they promised were mathematically impossible without extraordinary risk that wasn't mentioned anywhere in their materials. I compiled everything into a document: screenshots, regulatory searches, reverse image lookups of their testimonials, analysis of their promised returns. It was 20 pages of methodical debunking, each point supported by verifiable evidence. That evening, I sat Sarah down at our kitchen table and walked her through my findings. I expected shock, maybe disappointment, perhaps gratitude that I'd saved us from a costly mistake. Instead, I watched her face close off as I spoke. She listened without interrupting, but I could see her mentally dismissing each point as I made it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is a lot of work," she said finally. "You really went deep on this." I wanted to be thorough. "Sarah, this is clearly a scam. Look at these numbers. They're promising returns that would make them the most successful investment firm in history, but they have no regulatory oversight, no verified track record, no—" Maybe traditional regulatory frameworks don't apply to innovative financial technology. Traditional regulatory frameworks. The language was foreign to her usual way of speaking, borrowed from someone else's vocabulary. "Sarah, look at this." I pointed to a screenshot showing identical testimonials on 3 different scam websites. These aren't real people. These are stock photos used across multiple fraudulent schemes. She glanced at the screen, then back at me. "Maybe they licensed the same marketing materials. Companies do that all the time." I stared at her, feeling something fundamental shift between us. She wasn't engaging with the evidence, she was deflecting it. Logic had become irrelevant. Facts had become obstacles to overcome rather than information to consider. "You don't believe me," I said quietly. "I believe you did research. I believe you found things that concern you, but maybe you're being too cautious. Maybe you're letting fear of risk prevent us from achieving something incredible." Fear of risk, another borrowed phrase, another way of reframing prudence as weakness. That night, she slept turned away from me, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the first real crack in the foundation of our marriage. The next few weeks brought a steady drumbeat of encouragement from Sarah's family. Mike called daily with updates about Dave's growing returns. Jessica sent screenshots of luxury purchases made by other investors. Linda forwarded articles about cryptocurrency millionaires and people who retired in their 30s. Each piece of communication carried the same underlying message. This opportunity was slipping away, and my hesitation was the only thing standing between Sarah and financial freedom. Sarah began staying late at work more often, coming home with stories about colleagues who'd made fortunes in various investment schemes. She mentioned a coworker who'd bought a Tesla with Bitcoin profits, another who'd paid off her mortgage through day trading. "Everyone's getting ahead except us," she said one evening, her voice carrying a frustration that felt aimed at me. "We're playing it safe while opportunities pass us by." Everyone's getting ahead. But I knew her coworkers. Most were struggling with the same financial pressures we were. The stories felt manufactured, designed to create a sense of being left behind. The visits increased in frequency and intensity. They brought new testimonials, updated return figures, additional success stories. Each visit felt more like a sales presentation than a family gathering. During one particularly intense evening, Linda pulled me aside while Sarah was in the kitchen. "I know you're trying to protect her," she said, her voice soft but insistent. But sometimes protection becomes limitation. Sarah has dreams, ambitions. She wants more from life than just security. Just security. As if stability was somehow small, unworthy of aspiration. She deserves a partner who supports her growth, not one who holds her back out of fear. The implication was clear. My role as husband was conditional on my willingness to enable this decision. Refusal would be reframed as betrayal, caution as selfishness. That night, I found Sarah on her laptop again, scrolling through investment forums with an intensity that bordered on obsession. When I approached, she minimized the window, a small gesture that felt like a wall going up between us. "I've been thinking," she said without looking at me. "Maybe we should consider this more seriously. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?" What's the worst that could happen? Financial ruin, destroyed credit, lost savings, broken trust. But I could see in her eyes that she didn't want to hear about worst-case scenarios. She wanted permission to hope, validation for her growing certainty. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I love you. I want us to succeed, but this isn't the way." She finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made my chest tighten. Not anger, not frustration, but disappointment, as if I had revealed myself to be smaller than she'd hoped, less than she deserved. "Maybe it's not the way for you," she said quietly, "but it might be the way for me." I discovered the breach on a Thursday morning while checking our joint account balance before grocery shopping. There had been 3 login attempts the previous evening. Failed attempts, but attempts nonetheless. The timestamps showed they'd occurred while I was asleep and Sarah was supposedly working late. My hands shook as I changed the passwords on all our accounts. The violation felt physical, intimate. Someone had tried to access our financial security, our carefully built safety net. But the someone wasn't a stranger. It was someone with access to Sarah's devices, her passwords, her knowledge of our financial setup. I called the bank immediately, reporting the unauthorized access attempts and requesting additional security measures. The representative was professional but concerned, recommending we consider separate accounts if there were trust issues within the household. Trust issues within the household. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove home from work that evening. Sarah was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing dinner with an unusual attentiveness that felt performative. She smiled when I entered, but there was something strained about it. "How was your day?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "Interesting," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "I had to change all our banking passwords. Someone tried to access our accounts last night." I watched her face carefully. A micro-expression of guilt flashed across her features before being replaced with concern. "That's terrible. Do you think we've been hacked?" "We." But her surprise felt rehearsed, her concern manufactured. "The attempts were made from a device connected to our home network. Someone in this house tried to access our accounts." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Sarah continued stirring the pasta, but her movements had become mechanical, distracted. "Maybe it was a mistake," she said finally. "Maybe I was trying to check something and typed the wrong password." Maybe, but we both knew she was lying. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what's happening to us?" She set down the spoon and turned to face me. In her eyes, I saw a mixture of guilt, defiance, and something that looked like grief. "I was just looking. I wanted to see how much we could invest without affecting our daily expenses." Just looking, but looking required attempting to access accounts without my knowledge, violating the trust that formed the foundation of our shared financial life. "You could have asked me," I said. "Would you have said yes?" The question hung between us, loaded with accusation. She was right. I wouldn't have agreed, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she'd chosen deception over discussion, violation over honesty. "That's not how marriage works," I said. "We make these decisions together." "Do we?" Her voice rising slightly. "Or do you make them and I'm expected to go along?" The reframing was skillful, turning my caution into control, my protection into oppression. I recognized the language from her family's arguments, the vocabulary of victimization that transformed the victim into the aggressor. That night, I lay awake listening to Sarah's breathing, feeling the distance between us like a physical presence. Trust, once broken, leaves fragments that cut in unexpected ways. I found myself questioning every conversation, every expression, every gesture. When had she stopped being my partner and started being my opponent? The next morning, I made a decision that felt both necessary and devastating. While Sarah was at work, I opened individual accounts at a different bank and transferred half our savings. Not to punish her, not to control her, but to protect what remained of our financial security. Each transaction felt like a small death, the dissolution of the shared future we'd built together. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, couldn't unknow what I now knew. My wife was willing to risk our stability for a fantasy, and she was willing to deceive me to do it. I left the statements on the kitchen table where she would find them, along with a note explaining my actions. "I'm not trying to control you," I wrote. "I'm trying to protect us both. If you want to invest your portion, that's your choice, but I won't let us both be destroyed by this." When she came home that evening, I heard her sharp intake of breath from the kitchen. She appeared in the living room holding the statements, her face a mixture of shock and betrayal. "You moved our money," she said, her voice flat. "I moved my portion of our money," I corrected. "Your portion is still available for whatever you choose to do with it." "This is how you handle disagreements? By taking unilateral action?" The irony wasn't lost on me. She was accusing me of the exact behavior she'd exhibited when trying to access our accounts without my knowledge. "This is how I handle violations of trust," I said quietly. "Sarah, you tried to access our accounts behind my back. You were planning to invest our money without my consent. This isn't a disagreement. This is a fundamental breakdown in our partnership." She sat down across from me, the statements still clutched in her hands. "I was trying to secure our future. You were trying to gamble our present." "You don't understand," she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "This is real. This is our chance. My family has seen the returns. They've done the research." "Your family is wrong," I interrupted. "Sarah, I've shown you the evidence. This is a scam. It's designed to prey on people's hopes and fears, to make them believe they can get rich quick if they just trust the system." "Maybe you're wrong," she shot back. "Maybe your research is incomplete. Maybe you're so focused on protecting what we have that you can't see what we could have." Maybe, the word that had become her shield against reality, her defense against evidence that contradicted her growing certainty. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married valued logic, questioned claims, thought critically about important decisions. This woman was operating on faith, hope, and family pressure. This woman was willing to risk everything for the possibility of more. "I can't stop you from making this choice, but I won't be complicit in it." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when something shifted in her expression. The last vestige of uncertainty disappeared, replaced by a hardness I'd never seen before. "Fine," she said, standing up. "I'll make my own choices." Mike arrived the next evening with Jessica and Linda in tow, their faces set with determination. They'd clearly been summoned for this confrontation, this final push to bring me into line or isolate me completely. Sarah let them in without consulting me, and they arranged themselves in our living room like a tribunal. I remained seated, feeling oddly calm in the face of their collective intensity. "We need to talk," Mike began, his voice carrying an authority that felt foreign in my own home. "This situation has gone on long enough." "What situation?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your resistance to this opportunity," Linda said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Your need to control Sarah's financial decisions." Control. There was that word again, the label they'd attached to my caution, my insistence on evidence and logic. "Sarah is free to make her own decisions," I said calmly. "She has access to her portion of our savings. She can invest it however she chooses." "But you've made it clear you don't support her," Jessica added, her voice carrying a note of accusation. "You've undermined her confidence, questioned her judgment." "I've questioned the legitimacy of an investment scheme that shows every hallmark of fraud," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." "You've done research," Mike said dismissively. "We've done research too. We've seen the results firsthand. We've talked to real investors, seen real returns." Real investors, like Dave, who couldn't meet my eyes when he spoke about his success, like the testimonials that used stock photos, like the returns that defied mathematical possibility. "Look," Linda said, leaning forward with an expression that might have been intended as maternal concern. "We understand you're scared. Change is frightening. Risk is uncomfortable. But sometimes you have to trust the people who love you." Trust the people who love you. The manipulation was elegant in its simplicity, reframing skepticism as fear, caution as betrayal, evidence as obstinacy. I looked at Sarah, who had remained silent during this exchange. She sat slightly apart from me, closer to her family, her body language clearly indicating which side she'd chosen. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Support, trust, faith in your wife's judgment." "And if I can't provide those things?" The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Linda's eyes narrowed, Jessica's jaw tightened, Mike's expression hardened. "Then maybe," Linda said carefully, "you need to consider whether you're the right partner for Sarah's future." The right partner for Sarah's future. The threat was clear, delivered with the soft violence of family pressure and emotional manipulation. I turned to Sarah, searching her face for some sign of the woman I'd married, some indication that she recognized what was happening here. "Is that how you feel?" I asked quietly, "that I'm not the right partner for your future?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the war playing out in her expression, love and loyalty, battling against family pressure and financial fantasy. "I feel like you don't trust me," she said finally. "I feel like you think I'm stupid, gullible, easily manipulated." "I think you're being manipulated. That's not the same thing." "By my own family?" "By people who profit from your investment regardless of whether you do." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "They're trying to help us succeed." "They're trying to recruit us into a pyramid scheme." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mike's face reddened, Linda's expression turned cold, Jessica looked away. "I think," she said quietly, "you should apologize for that accusation." I stared at my wife, feeling the last threads of our connection snap. She was asking me to apologize for speaking the truth, to retract evidence-based conclusions in favor of family harmony. I can't do that. "Then maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to consider whether this marriage is working." The ultimatum came 3 days later, delivered not in anger, but in the cold language of finality. Sarah sat across from me at our kitchen table, her hands folded, her expression composed. "I've made a decision," she said. I'm going to invest in quantum asset management. $50,000. $50,000. Her entire portion of our savings, plus some. That's your choice, I said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. I want you to support this decision. I want you to trust me, trust my family, trust that this is the right move for our future. Our future. But it was clear that our future was conditional on my compliance. And if I can't? She looked at me with something that might have been sadness. Then I think we want different things from life. I want growth, opportunity, the chance to build something extraordinary. You want safety, predictability, the status quo. The characterization was unfair, but effective. She'd reduced our conflict to competing values, ambition versus fear, growth versus stagnation, possibility versus limitation. I want us to make smart decisions together, I said. I want us to build our future on solid ground, not on fantasies and false promises. Maybe what you call fantasies, I call vision. Maybe what you call false promises, I call opportunities you're too afraid to see. Too afraid to see. The final insult, the ultimate dismissal of evidence and logic in favor of hope and family pressure. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw that she was already gone. The woman sitting across from me had made her choice weeks ago. This conversation wasn't a negotiation, it was a notification. "What are you asking me to do?" I said finally. "I'm asking you to trust me, to support me, to be the partner I need you to be." The partner I need you to be. Not the partner I was, not the man she'd married, but the enabler she required for this particular fantasy. And if I can't be that person? She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on her folded hands. Then maybe we're not right for each other anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. Our marriage had become conditional on my willingness to participate in financial suicide. Love had become contingent on compliance. "I see," I said quietly. "I hope you'll think about it," she said, standing up. "I hope you'll realize that sometimes love means taking risks together, trusting each other's dreams." Taking risks together, but this wasn't together. This was her family's dream, her family's pressure, her family's scheme. I had become the obstacle to be overcome, not the partner to be consulted. That night, I lay awake listening to Sarah's breathing and feeling the weight of our ending. In the morning, I would call a lawyer. I would begin the process of protecting what remained of our shared assets. I would start the painful work of untangling a life built for two. But tonight, I mourned the woman I'd married, the partnership we'd built, the future we'd planned. She was choosing her family's fantasy over our reality, their promises over our partnership, and I was choosing self-preservation over enabling destruction. Neither of us was wrong exactly, but we were no longer compatible. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I received a text from Sarah. "You were right. I'm sorry." I didn't respond immediately. The vindication I'd expected to feel was absent, replaced by a hollow sadness for the woman who'd lost everything, chasing a dream sold by people who claimed to love her. The collapse of quantum asset management made local news. The founder had disappeared with approximately $12 million in investor funds. The proprietary algorithm turned out to be a simple website that showed fabricated returns while funneling money into offshore accounts. Dave lost his savings. Mike lost his house. Jessica's marriage didn't survive the financial stress. Linda, who had invested her retirement fund, moved in with relatives. Sarah lost our marriage and her financial security, but she gained something else: clarity about the difference between family loyalty and family manipulation, between supporting someone's dreams and enabling their destruction. I felt no satisfaction in being right. Being right had cost me my marriage, my partner, my shared future. Being right had meant watching someone I loved walk willingly into disaster while I stood helpless to prevent it. But being wrong would have cost me everything. The hardest lesson wasn't about financial scams or family manipulation. It was about the moment when love becomes conditional, when partnership becomes performance, when trust becomes a weapon used against you. Sarah's family didn't set out to destroy our marriage. They believed in their fantasy, their get-rich-quick scheme, their vision of easy wealth. They genuinely thought they were helping, offering opportunity, sharing success. But belief without evidence is faith, and faith without boundaries is fanaticism. When people invest their identity in an outcome, contrary evidence becomes personal attack. Skepticism becomes betrayal. Caution becomes cowardice. I learned that betrayal often wears the mask of optimism. It arrives not as cruelty, but as opportunity, not as deception, but as vision, not as manipulation, but as family loyalty. The most dangerous lies are the ones we want to believe. I learned that sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing people you love. Sometimes wisdom looks like fear. Caution looks like control. Boundaries look like betrayal. Sometimes the person trying to save you becomes the enemy, and the people leading you toward destruction become your heroes. Most importantly, I learned that you cannot save someone from a choice they're determined to make. You can present evidence, offer alternatives, express concerns, set boundaries. But ultimately, people will choose their own path, even when that path leads to destruction. My choice was simple: disappear into someone else's fantasy or preserve my own reality. Enable destruction or protect what remained. Be the partner Sarah needed for her delusion, or be the man I needed to remain. I chose myself. It wasn't noble or romantic or particularly admirable. It was survival. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes wisdom means walking away. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction. The marriage ended not because we stopped loving each other, but because we loved different things more than we loved each other. She loved the possibility of wealth, the approval of her family, the fantasy of easy success. I loved stability, truth, the partnership we'd built together. In the end, those loves were incompatible. I still think about Sarah sometimes, wonder if she's rebuilt her life, learned from the experience, found someone who shares her actual values rather than her temporary obsessions. I hope she has. I hope she's happy. But I don't regret my choice. I don't regret protecting myself, setting boundaries, refusing to enable destruction. I don't regret choosing reality over fantasy, evidence over hope, self-preservation over codependence. Love shouldn't require you to ignore reality. Partnership shouldn't demand the sacrifice of judgment. Family shouldn't pressure you into financial suicide. When it does, the loving thing, the only thing, is to say no, even when saying no costs you everything you thought you wanted. Even when saying no means saying goodbye. Thanks for listening to our story. It's wonderful to have you here. Please like and subscribe to have more content come your way, and do check out the other stories from our channel.